All right, welcome back to the waiting room with Dr. SEC. We've got now on the Net Talk hotline Greg Poole from Bulldawg Illustrated. If you haven't had a chance to check out the website, we're going to get all that information to you. It's one that I frequent on almost every day. So much great material they have on there from players to recruiting to everything you can imagine that is Georgia Bulldogs. You can find at Bulldawg Illustrated. At this time, let's welcome Greg to the show. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and what an amazing time it is. I can't. There's been some really good games in Athens over the last few years. Last year, think about LSU and South Carolina, where the crowd was really hyped. Kentucky was a game where wanting to send Aaron Murray away with the proper kind of going out after his illustrious career. But this week, just to me, has a feel that I can't remember in a long, long time, maybe since the blackout against Auburn several years ago. But with Todd Gurley returning, with Nick Marshall, with the way the Auburn Georgia game ended last year, do you get that somebody that's covering them every day right there? Do you get that feeling that this game just has a special buzz about it?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. I I really haven't seen this in quite a while. The fan base is really hyped for this game, and I think it's going to be an outstanding game. At least I hope it is. I worked the sidelines for that LSU game last year, and that may have been the best crowd I've seen in Sanford Stadium, and I've been going to Sanford Stadium since the early '60s. And I expect this week will be pretty close to that, if not even more electric.
Absolutely. And let me just kind of get your opinion. I know outside of Athens, to me, it seems like most people look at the Todd Gurley situation and say, okay, he messed up and broke a rule. It's kind of a stupid rule, especially, with just, over the last year where they've even made it where the players could have unlimited food. Why shouldn't this guy be able to go out on dates? Why shouldn't this guy be able to, have the same life that other kids have, with the kind of money that he generates as the best player in college football. I don't care what anybody says. But what has kind of been the take inside the Athens area? Is everybody pretty supportive of Todd Gurley? What's kind of been the overall take?
Not everybody is not ever supportive
Yeah.
of any position, but I think most people are. Most people are supportive. Some people way more so than others. Some people are angry with NCAA. Some people understand that he broke the rule and had to pay for it, but still are supportive. So I say, no, I don't know how to put a number on it, but the vast majority of fans are supportive. Yes.
Absolutely. And looking at Todd Gurley, I mean, listen, I know the rules were broke and I get all of that. And I'm just glad that he chose to come back because he really is one of the most special running backs I've seen in the last couple of decades when you look at what he can do carrying the ball, blocking, passing, well, yeah, even passing now, but receiving. I mean, the
Yeah.
things that this guy can do, I'm just excited we're going to get to see him play a few more games.
Yeah, so am I. I think he's going to be really ready for this game. I have no way of knowing, of course, because we don't get to see very much of practice. But the big question in my mind, in the back of my mind, is his conditioning. I'm hoping it's there. I trust that it's there. But if you remember last year when he was out with injury for a
Yeah.
while, he was definitely out of condition. But if his conditioning is right, I'm sure he's going to be hard for Auburn to handle.
Absolutely, and you make a great point. Last year, of course, that was an injury, so hopefully, my biggest thing is him not over pressing because we've seen he's such a good guy off the field as far as his, all I could ever tell of his personality, much more, you know, much less of a Johnny Manziel, much more of a laid back, out of whatever type guy. But when he gets on the field, has to turn it up, and sometimes that energy has cost him a penalty here and there. I think that's one thing I want to see is him just channel that energy.
Yeah, he's definitely combative. Most people don't get that, but when he gets on the football field, uh, he's I guess combative is as good a word as any. But yeah, I think you're going to see that, and Todd Gurley is an excellent back, as you said, the best back in the country, in my opinion, also. What people are missing about this Georgia team, especially this Georgia offense, I think, is the improvement of the offensive line in Coach Will Friend's fourth year. I think it's his fourth year. But Georgia's offensive line is better than it's been since he got there, and certainly it was horrible before he got there. So that you don't bring in two freshman running backs during his absence and have them perform the way they did unless your offensive line is providing space for them to run, even though those two freshmen are extraordinary.
Absolutely, and I could not agree with you more about Will Friend. I've got to be honest. I was very critical of the hiring initially because Texas goes and gets Georgia's offensive line coach, and how does Georgia respond? They go and get UAB's, or I believe that's where he was at prior to that. I'm like, this isn't a good hire. They need to go get the big name. But I really have been impressed with this offensive line and the growth of some of these players. One that comes to mind is David Andrews. I mean, that guy has become an absolute monster out there, and we've seen the difference when he wasn't on the field against Florida. I mean, this offensive line, as you said, they've got several NFL backs on this roster, but Will Friend deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do.
No question about it, and that to me has been the difference in the team, at least the offense. I told people several years ago, that Will Friend was going to make a genius out of Mike Bobo. Of course, I was making fun of the fact that people were on Bobo's case so badly a few years ago.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, the problem then was the mismanagement and bad recruiting in the offensive line, which Will Friend has corrected.
Absolutely. And now I want to move to this Auburn game, but I want to talk just a little bit about this freshman class because I really, I can think back to the times there was supposed to be the dream team, and Isaiah Crowell and Ray Drew and all of those guys. But this recruiting class from this past season, the freshmen this year, it was one of the most dynamic classes I've ever seen. I mean, even a guy like Isaiah McKenzie, who was like a last-minute addition and didn't expect to see him on the field that much this year. Now this guy's like the rebirth of the human highlight film out there. Every time he touches the ball, something great can happen. Obviously, Nick Chubb and Sony Michelle, Lorenzo Carter, all of these guys. I mean, this freshman class has been something special.
It absolutely has. And your point about McKenzie is well taken. And I think the key to that is the turnaround in Georgia's recruiting.
Yeah.
You haven't seen McKenzie on the field very much. And that's different for Georgia. Georgia was able to offer a scholarship to a kid knowing that he was basically a special teams and a unusual formation offensive player. They haven't been able to do that in the past. They've been recruiting to need so much in the past, and frankly have missed on a bunch of kids. But in this past class, they filled their needs and were able to get some of those ancillary players like McKenzie, who turned out so big against Kentucky last week.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about the game coming up, but one last thing on recruiting. This recruiting class comes up. It seems like it's going to be pretty amazing, too. Georgia has got to have one of the top 2 or 3 recruiting staffs at this point, with the addition of Jeremy Pruitt and his staff, and what was already on campus and the job that especially the offensive staff members had done recruiting. I mean, this is lining up that now they're really beginning, instead of top 10 classes, which, puts you maybe, you can have a top 10 class, you'd be the 10th best class and really only have the 6th or 7th best class in the SEC. This kind of puts them up there among the elite of the top 3, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think most of the services have this class rated currently as number 2 behind Alabama. And it has the potential to actually pass Alabama, of course, depending on what Bama does and which players Georgia can sign between now and signing day. Of course, getting Josh Sweat, who will be in Athens over the weekend on his official visit, the number 1 player in the country, would go a long way toward getting the class to number 1. But one thing I want to point out about this class is, first of all, it's going to be a big class, probably 30 or 31 players. Secondly, you mentioned Pruitt earlier and his what he has added to recruiting. One thing that they're doing now is they've broadened the geographic footprint considerably. They're actively pursuing players in Texas and Mississippi and on the West Coast and in the Northeast on a regular basis, and Georgia hasn't done that much in a while. And so, if people are always on Georgia fans are always on about recruiting in state, and I get that. But if you can recruit nationally, chances are you're going to have a good class every year.
Yeah, and my rebuttal to that complaint, I know there's been some really good players that have got out of state. Of course, people have got to remember Georgia's not your usual state. A lot of times they're closer to other universities than they are the University of Georgia. But my biggest rebuttal to that is who have been the best players during the Mark Richt era? Most of those guys haven't been Georgia guys. Now they've had their share, obviously, David Pollock, David Green. But look at, Matthew Stafford, A.J. Green, Todd Gurley, Noshawn Marino. All of those guys were guys that they had to go out quite a distance to get. Marino in New Jersey, Stafford in Texas, A.J. Green in South Carolina, Todd Gurley in the Carolinas as well, Keith Martin. These guys, I mean, listen, it's about getting the best. It ain't always about getting who's in state. But I get the gripe as well. I mean, you want to see the homegrown, and there's been some good ones. But it's impossible to lock a state like Georgia down, and it's also, I think, ignorant to pass on some of these elite players outside of the state.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're doing a great job, much better job. The whole staff is recruiting well. One of the complaints in the recent past was that the defensive staff, especially the head of the defensive staff, didn't really recruit or didn't recruit well, and that certainly is not the case now.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Greg Poole with Bulldogs Illustrated. Okay, big game this weekend. University of Georgia, Auburn Tigers, and really, as I've kind of broke down and looked at these teams, they have a whole lot of similarities. I mean, they really do. From what they like to do, running the football, to the defense. How at moments it's looked good, at other moments kind of very much not good. But of course, as they go forth, I mean, this is a game where Auburn, as bad as their defense has been, they've played pretty good against the run at times. And Georgia's got a very unique situation. I've talked about this quite a bit on air this week. They've got Todd Gurley coming back, who's the best running back in the country. They've got Nick Chubb, who's playing as well as anybody in the country. They got Sony Michel, who you want to get integrated to the offense. Of course, they can slot him out and do some other things with him. And then you got Hudson Mason, who's playing very good football right now. And with all those guys, there's only so many touches. Mike Bobo's got to be very careful how he distributes the football this week, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, but I think you're going to see him handle it pretty much the way he did at the start of the season.
Yeah.
The question, Georgia's going to move the ball on Auburn. If they don't make mistakes and they play their offensive football game, they're going to score points. The question in my mind is, can the defense prevent Auburn from scoring more points than that? That's an obvious call in every football game, but in this case, I think we're looking at a high-scoring game. So I think Georgia's got to score more than 40 points to win.
Absolutely, and looking at this Auburn offense, I mean, listen, they look a lot like last year. I mean, I know they're not rushing for as much, but when you look at Cameron Artis-Payne, what he's doing reminds me a lot of what Trey Mason did. Is kind of just guys leading the SEC in rushing and somehow flying under the radar still. Cameron Artis-Payne, although he isn't a breakaway guy, I think his longest carry of the year is about 35, 36 yards. He just goes in there every single play and just guts out yards.
He does. He's an excellent back. I'm not as worried about his contribution to Auburn as I am Nick Marshall's pass run option plays. That's where Georgia's going to get hurt. Third and long, and if Marshall is able to either get the ball off or find a gap, especially between the tackles, to get upfield, Georgia's going to be in trouble. They need to be able to contain Marshall and play their pass defense. I don't think Marshall is just throwing the ball is going to beat Georgia, although he did last year on the last play. But it's going to be that combination of or his option to run or a pass. It's going to give him fits, and they're going to have to maintain the gaps. They're going to have to set the edge. They're going to have to be very disciplined, and it's going to be a good game.
Absolutely, and I'm really curious to see what Jeremy Pruitt does. Obviously, we can't use the same game plan that was used against Florida, but looking at this team, I mean, this is a game where, as great as Leonard Floyd is, maybe he's not always the best option in there. I mean, he's best when he can just pin his ears back and go after the quarterback. We've seen kind of the emergence of Carter as well. Do we see less of Floyd this week, much similar to maybe Kentucky game?
Yes, I think so. He'll play. They said his shoulder was hurt last week, and I'm sure it was. I'm sure they weren't lying about it, but I imagine everybody has something that hurts. I think his bench time was more about his performance against Florida than it was against any injury. And I don't have any inside knowledge about that. That's just speculation on my part. But judging from his face on TV on the sidelines during the game, he didn't seem to be real happy about where he was standing on the sideline. And I don't blame him. He's a player who wants to play.
Yeah.
But having a freshman go out and replace him is something that hopefully will motivate him to pay attention to what Pruitt says, to do his job the way Pruitt wants it done.
Absolutely. And Jeremy Pruitt, and I appreciate you taking so much time with us, and we'll get close to wrapping it up. Jeremy Pruitt, has the defense has looked very good at times when they're playing well. I think a lot of the recent, I don't think people really understand the toll that long road trips have on you and on the body. And when you consider the fact that I looked up the other day, it was like 4,500 round trip miles they put on in the last 4 games. They didn't just go to Auburn and Georgia Tech. They were going to all the way across to Missouri and back, all the way across to Arkansas and back, all the way down to Jacksonville, back, Kentucky and back. And I'm hoping the energy of this crowd is going to make a big difference for this Georgia defense in the game, because obviously they play better at home. That's natural for young teams and defenses, but they really just need an energy pickup.
Absolutely, and I think they get it. There's not going to be a energy problem, a motivation problem. It's just going to be a matter of whether they can play with Auburn or not. I think they can, but it's after all, last year was a matter of a fluke play at the end of the game, and Auburn had a much better record than Georgia. So it's not like Auburn is based on last year. It's just going to walk on the field and blow them out. So maybe energy is what the game comes down to.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Greg Poole, Bulldawg Illustrated. Can you give all of our listeners where they can find you on Twitter and about the website as well?
Yes, my Twitter account is ECDawg, DAWG, _BI, and on the web it's BulldawgIllustrated.com, and that's Bulldawg, DAWG, and drop by and chat with us. We have a really active chat community on our daily recruiting thread, and we'll be happy to have any fan base come by. We won't say anything out of the way, and be glad to have you chat with us.
Absolutely. Want to encourage all of our listeners to go down there, once again, to Bulldawg Illustrated, and spelled the only way that you spell Bulldog. That's with a DAWG in the state of Georgia. Hey, Greg, we appreciate so much you taking some time being with us, and hope to have you on again real soon.
Thank you, Doc. Let me know. I'll be glad to be here.
Thank you.